My name is Bonnie B, and you are watching The Power of Perseverance.
Today I get to welcome on Ben Azadi with Keto Camp. This conversation is going to be phenomenal, you guys. There's so many gold nuggets that we're going to be sharing with you today. Ben is the best-selling author of the book Keto Flex, and he has several supporting materials with that include fasting and the perfect health booklet and the power of sleep, all of these incredible resources he has put together based off of his personal health transformation. And I'm excited to dive into it so you can share some of the incredible tools that you've been able to gain and give back to the community and other people's journey. So Ben, welcome.
Bonnie, thanks for having me. It was cool meeting you at the Vault conference just a few weeks ago here in Florida.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So for people that know me personally, I've got to tell them the story.
Yeah.
So I have seen Ben's stuff on Instagram. I have seen it, YouTube, and I'm like, okay, I've got to meet this guy. Your credentials were really intriguing to me because it's very unique what you do. And I think it brings a lot of value to anybody who wants to work with you. And so as I'm going through the process, at maybe like 6 months out before I actually met you, I was like, I've got to meet this guy. So I'm in line, you guys, at the Vault conference with Patrick Bet David. And I turn around and I saw Ben behind me and I was like, you're Ben. And he looked at me like, okay. And then I told him how I wanted to meet him and that I appreciated his story. And then we shared journey stories a little bit. And then from there, magic happened. So I'm glad that happened.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I was right behind you, and now we're on a podcast having a wonderful conversation. I love it.
Yes. So let's dive into Ben, you were overweight, obese, over 80 pounds, and you got to a point where you just said enough is enough and you started making changes. Can you share with us kind of a little clippet of what that final thought was that jump-started you into your change?
Yeah, for me, what jump started me into my change was hitting rock bottom. This is back in 2008. I was 24 years old. I weighed 250 pounds at that time. I was physically obese, mentally obese, depressed, suicidal thoughts, exploring ways to end my life, to just put an end to the suffering. I was very unhealthy and unhappy, and I had a lot of bad behaviors and bad habits, addictions to drugs and video games and sugar. And I wanted to give up on life. And I kept thinking about my mom and the devastation she would have to deal with if I took my life. And I didn't want to do that to her. So it stopped me from pursuing suicide, thankfully. And then I knew I had to figure things out. The change came with tired of being rock bottom. I'm tired of crying every day. I'm tired of being overweight and in pain. I got to figure this out. So the first thing that I did was I started to pick up books. I read the first book was a book called The Slight Edge by an author named Jeff Olson. And that book taught me about habits that we do every day compound over time to get you results in life, good or bad results. So I realized a lot of my habits for years were really bad, and now it has compounded into a poor life in terms of like the way I felt and the way I looked. So I knew if I could just change some habits and compound it in a different direction, in a positive direction, I'm going to be down the right path there. So that one book led to a second book and a fifth book and a 20th book. And I started to fall in love with all these authors. Like Dr. Wayne Dyer was a huge influence and still is for me, Tony Robbins and Bob Proctor. And the books did so much for me. It helped me realize there's a whole new world I never knew existed, and I could be a part of this world, and I could be happy, and I could be healthy, and I could find a passionate living. But the first change started with taking responsibility and ownership. And that's something that I neglected. And I really believe most people don't even understand the word responsibility. To me, that is our ability to respond to life. That's our responsibility, right? So if our ability to respond to life is poor, we're going to get poor results. My ability to respond to life was very poor. I was blaming all of my external circumstances. I was blaming my enabling family members, giving me bad food and as a way of loving me. I was blaming my slow metabolism and poor genetics and this person and that person and this thing. But when you take ownership and responsibility, all that goes away. You stop being the victim of your history and you start to become the victor of your destiny. So I started to understand that and connect those dots mentally. Then that just got me moving forward with moving my body, eating real food. And fast forward 9 months from taking responsibility, I lost 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds all the way down to 170 pounds. I went from 34% total body fat to as low as about 6% body fat, and completely transformed my physical body. But more important than the physical appearance was what it did for my mental health. And I achieved what I call a mental six pack, and what it did for my thoughts. And that was the start for everything for me. That was about 15 plus years ago. And I became a personal trainer along the way. I opened up a CrossFit gym along the way, sold the CrossFit gym, became a health coach, certified with functional diagnostic nutrition, wrote several books, the latest one, as you mentioned, called Keto Flex. And I went online completely in 2018, where I said, I'm going to educate as many people as possible. So I started my YouTube channel, eventually the podcast, and the social media started to grow. So the mission is to educate and to inspire 1 billion people, to wake them up, to inspire them, to help them understand their body is built to be self-healing. And we use these ancient healing strategies like ketosis and fasting to tap into that innate intelligence.
I love that you say that word awareness. I think taking ownership, like you said, responsibility, we are conditioned from depending on what kind of a mindset you're born into, but you're conditioned at an early age to think that everything is outside of us. It's everyone else's problem, and only things can be fixed outside of us. We're almost taught to not have control of our life, so it almost becomes this suppression of awareness. And that magical moment when you said, I owned my life and took responsibility, look at the life you've been able to create for yourself just by releasing the guilt and the shame in a lower vibration that comes with that, and being able to say, you know what, I own my life and I can change. And how empowering that can be, not only for you, but what you've been able to do for so many people. And that started in 2008. Mm-hmm. And how many years later over time has it been, just because it's been your own personal journey?
Yeah, 15 years, exactly, right? And you're right. Les Brown calls it thermostats versus thermometers, right? People who are behaving in a way where they're a thermometer, they react to their outside environment, the outside circumstance. So they let the outside environment and temperature control them, like a thermometer, versus a thermostat who actually sets the temperature from within no matter what the external state is. So yeah, I think we should all be a thermostat versus a thermometer, and set that intention, that vibration from within, and let it trickle out to the rest of the world.
I've got to ask this question, you being a male, and also the idea in society that men should suppress their emotions, no crying, be tough. If you're connected, or if you're any kind of spiritual, like, it's kind of shunned on unless you're religious. Through a weight loss journey, not only are you transforming physically, but you said something really important. You have to transform your mental game as well. And I would imagine with that mental game, there was a lot of emotions that came up. Can you talk about how you worked through those, and how you overcame maybe some of those ways that, as that came up, and you probably initially, I would imagine, felt like, oh, I shouldn't feel that, or how do I work through that? How did you work through that?
Yeah, you're right. We have been conditioned, especially men, to suppress feelings, or either like suppress the feelings and run away, or get angry. Is usually like the two options that we get as males, at least what we're taught, versus women who are a lot better at expressing their emotions and having conversations. We're generally speaking, right? And I think that's why we never really see, like, when there's a mass shooting, it's always a lone gunman, right? It's never a lone gun women. And I think part of that is because men are always suppressing their feelings. And I was the same way. So for me, a big part of the transformation, and I think for everybody, is the mindset. I believe that's 95% of the results will come from the mindset switch, the paradigm shift. And then the 5% will come from more strategy. And it has to be really good strategy. But I know that for me, it took me about 2 years before my self-image changed, meaning I was always this obese guy. I was always overweight. I was bullied. I was picked on. I live in Miami, and I would go to the beach and wear my t-shirt to the ocean because I was just so ashamed of showing my body. And I lost all that weight. I'm 6% body fat. I got just wicked six pack, and I'm still kind of ashamed to show my body. I'm still, thinking inside that I'm this obese man. And it took me about 2 years before that self-image changed, where I realized, wow, I'm actually a lean, healthy person. So it took some time for me. And a big part of that is understanding the conversations that we have every day. I always say you are the most influential person you'll speak to today, because we have
Yeah.
these 50,000 plus thoughts every day. So once we start to become aware of those conversations we're having with ourselves every day, and we start to change the story, because it's all just a story that we create, then we start to create great change. We change the self-image, and it becomes a lot easier on this journey.
Well, I would imagine that's how you've been able to maintain long-term results. Have you ever heard that understanding your emotions is the language of the subconscious?
Yeah, I love that. Yes, I agree with that.
And I think the more we also normalize that and put that hand in hand with weight loss journeys, like I had lost all this weight and I'm getting ready to compete in a bodybuilding show. And I didn't see myself as a figure competitor. I saw myself as this chubby person that, all of these ideas, like you said, and it's taken so much time. So on that, I want to hear what one tip is that you have for people to start on that emotional journey along with your weight loss journey. Was there something that you thought was really important that you think people should implement?
Yes, there's I call it a vitamin, a supplement. Although you can't really buy it at the supplement store or on Amazon. It's called vitamin G. And vitamin G is so potent. It's so effective. It's anti-inflammatory. It helps with depression. It helps with fat loss. It helps with every benefit you're seeking. Dr. Joe Dispenza has done brain scans on individuals who took vitamin G. He saw 1,200 chemical processes turn on automatically that put the body and the brain in this anti-inflammatory state. There are studies that show vitamin G lowers blood sugar levels, lowers blood pressure levels, and just helps you feel happier and healthier. So vitamin G is gratitude. It's the practice of gratitude. So that has been
Mm.
a huge part of my journey. It still is to this day. And the biggest tip I could say about gratitude, number one, it's not woo-woo. You actually reprogram your brain when you focus your energy on what you're grateful for versus what's not working for you, because the brain is going to filter out what you've taught it to filter out. There's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system. And when you're constantly putting your attention and energy into the things you hate about yourself and what's not working for you, you're programming that RAS, the reticular activating system, to see more of the things that you hate about yourself, to see more of the things that are not working for you, to see more of the problems. But when you start to shift that to gratitude, you start to appreciate your body and appreciate the journey and appreciate the steps and the people in your life. Now the problems you were perceiving as problems turn into opportunities, and you get growth from that. So gratitude is something you don't want to treat as a checklist. You want to treat it with feeling. It's the gateway to the heart, gratitude is, and you want to make sure you feel the gratitude. So for me, that
Mm.
has been a daily practice ever since my transformation, and I'm very intentional with getting in that vitamin G every single day.
I love how you put that. I've never heard that before. And you're 100% right. You almost have to embody gratitude. So when I have it written on my arm,
Oh, look at
gratitude.
that. I
So
love that.
anytime I go through something hard, I know if I just refer to gratitude, anything is possible.
That's
So
right.
I got goosebumps as you were talking about and almost a little bit emotional because, when you go through something so transformational, you really do have to go back to gratitude.
You do.
And I think that's easy for people to lose. But I love that you say when you're embodying it, it can't be just saying it. It's got to be a feeling. You have to close your eyes and imagine it and do some of these practices that Joe Dispenza talks about. A
Yeah.
lot of people call it woo woo, but it's not. Neurolinguistic practicing actually talks about how when you're in touch with all of these senses and can really implement them and communicate with that subconscious, your conscious actions now start to work towards your goals. And you are doing all of these things, which
Right.
contributed to your weight loss. And now what you're really focused on outside of helping people understand keto, which by the way, for all of you guys listening, when we're going to talk about keto, we're going to talk about healthy fats, healthy fruits and vegetables, healthy proteins. I would imagine this is not going to be what the typical mindset is where people are thinking bacon and sausage and unhealthy fats. We have got to change the paradigm about what people think when they say keto. Would you agree?
Yeah, you're speaking my language, Bonnie. I agree. You want me to get into that now?
Yes, let's
Yeah.
go. I
Okay.
want to hear, I got to hear what you're going to say next because you're going to probably read my mind when it comes to this.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I mean, everybody's heard about keto. It's that's the benefit. That's like a great thing. People have heard about it, but the drawback is so many people have this misconception. Number one, you ask 100 people in the streets, what do you think about keto? They're going to say, oh, keto, it's a fad diet, it's something to lose weight. And that's a completely incorrect way to view it. So ketosis is a metabolic process that every human being has been using forever, meaning since the dawn of humankind. Every single one of our ancestors did ketosis. How do I know that? Because they didn't have food available to them all the time. They needed to have a metabolic switch to burn fat and use ketones, which fuels the brain when glucose drops. When we fast forward now to the world that we live in, we see that 93%, that's what studies showed, 93% of American adults are metabolically unhealthy. They have high blood pressure, high levels of glucose and insulin. They're metabolically challenged. I call them being in a keto deficiency. They really could tap into this ketogenic state. So it's not a fad diet. It's not even a diet. It's a metabolic process. If we really want to talk about fad diets, then we'll talk about the standard American diet, which is toxic and brand new. But keto, nothing new about it. It's not going away because it's not a diet like the paleo diet or even the Atkins diet or the vegan diet. Keto is
You're
different.
born into keto. You
Exactly.
literally are born into keto because your mother's breast milk, and it's high density fatty nutrition going straight to help you develop your heart and your brain. I don't know how much simpler that can be. So if we're in that ketonic state, why wouldn't we want to try to maintain that throughout our life to prevent all of these diseases from brain, Alzheimer's, dementia?
You're exactly right. Burning fat is our birthright. Babies that are breastfed are naturally going in and out of the state of ketosis because they have the breast milk has saturated fat, cholesterol, and there's sugar in breast milk, but the baby's using it so efficiently. It's naturally going in and out because it's very important to develop that baby's brain. There's so much research showing what ketones does for the brain, for the body, for inflammation, for energy production. So the science is there. There's also an art. So what I teach my Keto Camp Academy students is the science, but the art is just as important, meaning how do you customize it now for you? Like a man does it differently than a woman.
Yes.
And a woman who has a menstrual cycle does it differently than a woman who's postmenopausal. So that's where the art comes into play.
So, along with the practice of keto and helping people putting together these customized nutrition programs for them, you also read blood work.
Yeah, exactly.
How important is that? Because I know a lot of people go to doctors and get that read, but you do it in a very specific way with these biomarkers, which are so incredibly important, especially I'm seeing a lot more functional doctors utilize this tool.
Yeah, blood work is great. It gives you clues to some changes you need to make. It's not going to give you cause, so you have to be aware that it's not going to tell you why something is too high or too low. Also, you want to make sure if you are doing blood work, you are working with somebody who understands how to read those labs. Because when you get your LabCorp report back or your Quest report, whatever lab company you're using, there's going to be a standard reference range. And that reference range is factoring in everybody who's done those tests. And I just established 93% of Americans are unhealthy. Do you want to be the average of unhealthy people? Of course not. So
Right.
A functional practitioner, somebody who understands it, has a very narrow standard reference range versus, a functional range versus a standard reference range. So for example, like vitamin D, on that lab report, which vitamin D is a very important marker to get done, it'll give you 30 to 70 as the reference range for vitamin D. Meaning if you're 32 vitamin D, a regular doctor will not flag that. They'll pat you on the back saying, good job, you're in a good range. But 32 for a vitamin D is actually deficient. We want to be over 50 to 70 for vitamin D. So that's just one example there, but it is important to get them done and then look at it from the lens of a functional reference range, not the standard reference range that they give to you on that report.
You know, I would think that's important too, especially as somebody is obese, is changing their lifestyles to be watching that. And that's where you're turning a lot of your focus in, not just educating on keto, but now you're focusing on educating and helping more obesity people. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, what we do, we're focusing a lot on individuals who are actually insulin resistant and type 2 diabetic, and they go hand in hand with people who are overweight and obese. So the cool thing about these conditions, we'll call them symptoms, or some people call them diseases, they're all preventable and they're all reversible. And keto and fasting are two very powerful tools to either prevent these conditions from ever happening. I don't care what your genetics are and what runs in your family, or if you have them currently, it works really well to reverse these conditions because the average American is eating over 300 grams of carbs every day. Not only that, they're eating it all throughout the entire day. So they're wearing out their pancreas. Their pancreas is constantly producing insulin. And
Define
studies,
carbs though, because there are good carbs. So people are unaware there. Well, let's hit on that really quick. When you say carbs, you're talking about highly refined processed carbohydrates.
yeah, that most people are eating packaged carbs, so they're highly refined. But if somebody is already insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, even that person cannot get away with a lot of hard carbohydrates, even if it's whole foods carbs. So it
Really?
depends on
So
the
even
person.
like fruit.
If that person is type 2 diabetic, we're limiting their fruit short term as we work on their metabolism, and then we're bringing it back in. Yes.
Okay, so continue on with the insulin and where you're doing the work on there.
Yeah, studies show that on average, it's 14 years before the average conventional doctor looks at the person's blood sugars, and their A1C, for example, will change 14 years later for them to be diagnosed as pre-diabetic or diabetic. But every year, as they continue to eat processed carbs and eat throughout the day, they're cranking out insulin, and that insulin is controlling the blood sugar levels. That's why it's not changing right away. But over time, that shift happens, and then boom, that person's diagnosed. But the problem was happening year after year. That's why we want to get a fasting insulin done, which is a blood test, and you want to see that in the single digits. 2 to 5 is a good range, and that reference range, it's going to say up to 25. No, I don't agree with that. So a fasting insulin will show you way before those blood sugars change. So that's a perfect example, like you mentioned, of getting some labs done. That would be a really smart one to get done.
So are there some things you can give out as pointers? So some people may not look like they're obese, but their internal health might be acting like they're obese. So are there some signs and symptoms that you can kind of look for, maybe like how you hold your weight or things like that, that tell people they should probably go get it looked at? For example, I've met people that say, well, I can't eat this way, I can't eat that way, because if I do, I don't, I can't eat carbs or this or that.
Yeah. So some people store fat, Bonnie, around their visceral fat. So they actually they're what's called tofis. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside, tofis. And that's dangerous. Packing fat away in your visceral fat is dangerous. So you might look thin on the outside, but you actually have metabolic damage taking place inside. Genetics play a big role with that, especially those from like South Asia have that problem. Indians as well, Indian descent. So I would say this for men, if you have love handles, that's a high correlation that you have a lot of visceral fat. For women,
Okay.
it's a little bit different. But for men, if you have a lot of love handles, high correlation, you have high visceral fat. And the customization part is very important to your point, because that's where the art comes into play. Some people could get away with more carbs and actually remain in ketosis versus others who need to actually restrict their carbs even more to stay in ketosis. So on average, to be in ketosis for the average person, their carbs should be under 50 grams total per day. And those carbs should be from whole food carbs, non-starchy carbs, green leafy vegetables, some fruit, and they could remain in ketosis and get all these benefits. But somebody who's really insulin resistant or type 2 diabetic, they might need to restrict that under 20 grams of carbs. Somebody who's very active could probably go up to 75 grams of carbs. So we got to find the sweet spot for that person.
Just as you're talking, all that keeps coming back to me is every little choice you make during the day is owning responsibility in that meal. You're making a choice. That's one small habit, and it builds up over the long run. I would imagine, this is how I imagine it. If I had a styrofoam cup and I took a needle and I poked a hole in it, it's not going to affect me long term. But if I took 1,000 of those needles, I'm going to start leaking. And before you know it, that there's nothing there. So if I don't pull the needles out and start to repair, I'm not going to get any better. And that's kind of how I start to think about these tiny habits. And as you're talking about food and how we evolve as humans, and really when it comes down to our overall health and wellness, and I just love the message that you're putting out there and what you're doing with Keto Camp. As far as resources go, I'll save that for the end, but I want to hear what your life motto is. Maybe not motto, but mantra. So like if you were to sum up what your purpose and how you go about doing the work that you do, how would you describe that purpose?
Well, I love what I do. So I wear a lot of hats. I'm a podcaster, keynote speaker, YouTuber, author. But I would say if I was going to choose one hat, I'm a teacher. I love to teach. I love to learn, and I love to teach. That is, sums up my passion. I just want to learn as much as I can, and I want to teach it as soon as I learn it. And I actually benefit. I learn it more. The quicker I teach something, once I learn it, the better I learn it myself. So it's kind of a selfish thing to teach it right away. So I love to teach. I love to speak. I love to teach on videos. I love to have conversations like this, Bonnie. That sums up like my passion. I just want to continue teaching. I want to reach more people. I want to empower and inspire people so they could understand that their body was built to be self-healing. You don't need this drug. You don't need this surgery. You don't need this medication. You don't need even some supplements, because everything we need to heal the body is from within. Now, don't get me wrong. I love supplements. I love exogenous ketones. They're to supplement doing the work, but the body does the work. The body heals itself. And I want to let people understand that and help them get inspired to know that, to really understand that.
I would say supplements are just like keto. It's a metabolic process. So supplements can support that process until your body can take over and fully have itself in that healing regimen fully. Um, and maximizing that through fasting. We had talked about that earlier. People are, fasting has become this trend instead of being looked at as a tool. It is another pathway into helping you accomplish whether it's a health goal, a body fat loss goal. So let's touch on that. Where is it that you see the misunderstanding about fasting being talked about?
Yeah, you're right. It's very popular these days. Fasting is just like keto. And with the popularity comes misconceptions. Fasting is also an ancient healing strategy like ketosis, been around for as long as humans have existed, just like ketosis. A couple of misconceptions is that number one, you're starving yourself. And that is not true, because we have body fat on our bodies for a reason. It's stored energy. So when you fast, then you tap into that stored energy. You're not necessarily doing it to restrict calories. There's a difference between calorie restriction and intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting yields you a lot more benefits versus just caloric restriction. And fasting to me is nature's reset button. You allow your body to take a break and recover. I always give an example of like somebody who has a corporate job, and let's say her name is Sandra, and Sandra works 9 to 5 every day, 9 to 5, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And one of these days it's 5 p.m. She put in 8 hours of work. She's walking to her car. She's exhausted. She put in a ton of work. And as she enters her car, she gets a phone call from her boss saying, Sandra, I'm sorry to let you know, but a new project just rolled through. We need you to come back to the office and work another 5 hours. So she works another 5 hours. It's now 10 p.m. at night. She's really exhausted, and she's about to go to her car, just ready to go home and crash. And she gets the same phone call. Sandra, we need you to come back and work for another 5 hours. So this is what's happening when we're eating frequently. The body cannot keep up with the demand. We're not allowing rest and recover. With fasting, it's like giving Sandra 2 weeks off for work. Now Sandra is going to recuperate. She's going to recover. She's going to find things to fix in her house. She's going to be productive. Like, this is what we're doing with the innate intelligence. When we stop eating food, which takes a lot of energy and a lot of demand, we allow the innate intelligence to go to work and start cleaning things up via autophagy and start fixing things and optimizing our hormones. And one of my favorite benefits of fasting is something called energy diversion, where when you eat food, it takes a lot of energy to digest a meal, to process a meal. It takes blood flow away from the brain to digestion. It takes all these resources to digest that meal. When you don't eat food and practice fasting, you divert that energy back to where it needs to be. So those are just a few benefits of fasting. I could go on and on about fasting.
Oh my gosh. Your brain, you basically just said when you appropriately fast, you are giving your brain exactly what it needs to function appropriately with cognitive response and speed, which is what most people complain about. And a huge problem, I've got young children, I don't know if you do, but they're in schools and they're given sugar and snacks all day long. And, they're under these terrible lights. And it's like, then they wonder what are all these problems that are going on, but we're not teaching our children at a young age appropriate habits and things because of the lack of education. So could you imagine how impactful this would be, just even implementing nuggets and tools into our school system at a young age, so that way as we become adults, we don't have to learn these things the hard way?
That would be the way to do it, to empower the young generation, because you're right. It leads to a whole bunch of problems when you practice the American way of eating and snacking and high carbohydrate processed junk. So yeah, that would be the way to do it, to empower the young generation to do that.
I totally agree. And it's also compared to, you're talking about, it's giving our stomachs a rest. Just like when we go lift heavy weights in the gym or we go for a run, our muscles have to recover. So it's the same correlation all the way around. And then if you're giving yourself that stillness from food and you're not working out, then you're giving your brain a chance to connect with yourself as a whole body, your mind, your spiritual. And I would imagine being spiritual, it was part of your practice in that. Would you agree?
Yeah, there is something spiritual about fasting, especially when you do longer fast. Like I've done a 5 day water fast. It's just that's why every religion, every single religion, they don't agree on everything. These different religions, but they all agree
Right.
on some form of fasting, because there's a spiritual component to fasting. There's something. It's hard to put into words. Like it's a feeling. It's a connection that you feel the more you fast, and even the longer that you fast. I know I felt that for sure when I did a long fast.
Have you ever had anybody come to you that you've worked with and they almost were like just not flexible in their change? And it almost, did it ever create doubt in your mind about what you were doing based off of working with someone that was not having results? Or have you had that experience?
I mean, in the beginning, yeah, but once you start working with enough people, you understand. I understand that not everybody will get the same results right away. Like a lot of people like to focus on weight loss and weight loss as being like the ultimate metric to whether or not something is working for them or not. That's the worst way to measure something, if something's working for you or not, because the body doesn't lose weight to get healthy. It gets healthy to lose weight. It's the complete opposite. So I always tell them to focus on what I call non-scale victories: energy levels, ketone levels, blood glucose levels, how your clothes fit, your skin complexion, how your sleep. But some people who are just so challenged, and maybe we've been doing this for a month and they're still not feeling any different. That usually means to me there's some hidden stressors going on, and it's usually an environmental stressor. It could be black mold in their
Mm.
house, heavy metal toxicity from silver fillings. I don't know, SIBO. So it helps me identify that, okay, we're doing everything right with keto and fasting and the mindset component, but you're still not getting the results that we want you to get. There's some hidden stressors going on, and it helps me kind of explore what that is. So it just signals to me that it's going to take more time for us to identify what exactly is blocking their body from healing itself.
So, in through your process, I know that you touched on how you got suicidal, but did you ever have moments where you doubted if, like, all right, so you've just learned something about yourself and other people are probably giving you feedback. Did it ever create doubt in your mind that you're like, well, maybe it's not keto or maybe it's not this? And if you did, how did you work through that to bring yourself back to, like, no, I know my purpose?
Yeah, in the beginning, when I was doing it all like myself, for myself to lose the weight, because I was really focused on weight loss in the beginning. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just reading Men's Health magazine and doing P90X and reading bodybuilding.com. And back then there wasn't really YouTube, so I didn't have YouTube, but there was the internet. So I was looking at, forums and blogs. I just knew that if I kept changing things up, my body was forced to adapt, and it helped me like prevent the stall. And that's a formula that I still use to this day. And I think all great like fitness coaches and personal trainers understand that. They always mix up the workout for their client. One week it's going to be high repetition, lower weight. The next week is going to be lower repetition, higher weight. The following week is a whole set of different exercises. It's forcing adaptation. So I did that a lot, and I still do. I think it's important to change up the routine, change up the foods, change up the fasting schedule, change up the supplements, and that's what really helps to break a stall or prevent a stall.
You talked about exogenous ketones. How are you? Do you take them daily? Do you stay on them? Do you feel like people should cycle on or off of them? Like, what's your take when it comes to incorporating this, whether you're on or off keto? I'm curious.
I don't take them daily, but I take them cyclically. I like them. So the way I use it personally for myself, I
Yeah.
will I will take them when I have a day where it's going to be heavily demanding on my brain. So if I have a whole bunch of podcast interviews or speaking on stage, I'll take it for that benefit, that brain boost benefit, where it just helps me like power through that and feel really good. I'll take it when I travel to help with the radiation from flying on an airplane. I'll take it sometimes before basketball. Every Sunday, I play basketball in a fasted state, and it really helps with my performance. So that's how I personally use it. Now, with my students, I'll have them use it very similar as well. But also, some students that are having a hard time getting ketones produced, they're maybe very insulin resistant, very type 2 diabetic, I'll have them get on some exogenous ketones to kind of prime the pump and help them feel the benefits of ketones before their body starts producing it. So there's different ways that we could use it. I'm a fan of exogenous ketones for sure, but we use them cyclically. The way the way we use it in our academy is cyclically.
You know, my biggest take from this overall conversation for me personally, not because selfishly, I'm giving anybody any nuggets, but it really is about once we can start healing ourselves as a whole, how much we really have within ourselves to um, come back to homeostasis, to come home to ourselves in so many ways. And once we're there, it's, you're taking these supplements, you're doing things based off of that understanding from the information. Now you're applying it and you're going by how it feels for you. So many people lose that connection with self. And for me, that's what's so fun about when I've had clients in the past or when I was, a trainer, watching that discovery. It was almost like a little blossom opening up for these people. And so if you could give one tip for somebody that is playing with the idea of just starting, what would that tip be?
Mm. Yeah, I would say the tip would be, because that person probably has symptoms, and the tip would be, understanding that symptoms are actually a gift from the innate intelligence. We've been brainwashed to believe that the symptoms we have are evil, the disease, the diagnosis is evil, we should hate it. But as a matter of fact, we should love the symptoms. It's your body's check engine light. Thank God the body has a mechanism to show you got like 7 check engine lights turned on. Let's figure out why. So understand that your symptoms are not the problem. They are a result of the problem. Don't go chasing the symptoms. Being overweight, it's a weight loss, it's a weight symptom, not a weight problem. Brain fog, autoimmune conditions, these are all symptoms, right? So understand your symptoms are a gift, number one. Number two, get clear on why you want to make these changes. Get a really strong vision on why you want to make the changes. I mean, Jim Rohn used to always say, when the why is strong, the how becomes easier. It's just going to make your decision making a lot easier. It's going to make these obstacles turn from a stop sign to a speed bump. So instead of stopping you, it's just slowing you down, and then you're moving forward when you're clear on your why. And then the third thing, I know you said one thing, but the third thing would be...
No, do it. Give me 3.
The third thing, I guess this would be all lumped into the same tip, but the third thing would be community. Because if you're making these changes like keto, it's going to be radical to some people in your life, and they're going to tell you it's dangerous for you, fasting is starving yourself, or whatever stinking thinking thoughts they're going to project on you. So having a community who's doing something similar and supporting you, that's very important. So those would be like the top 3 things that I would utilize right when you get started.
I love that. You have to have community support. It's so true. If you have anybody that's not in a healthy mindset, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this too. The cleaner and leaner you get, the more you're going to weed out the people that aren't good for you, because a healthy mind wants to see you succeed, but people who have an unhealthy or toxic mindset, they don't want to see you do better than they are. And then when you do, they criticize it, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like, well, then don't be in my life. Like, I'm trying to grow. Either come with me, and then you have to be willing to let that go, and then
Yes.
I love the part where it's like, all right, if I get a headache or something's going on, am I suppressing it by taking a Band-Aid, or am I going to a doctor to Band-Aid that? Because those are signals of our body telling us, listen, something's going on, address this. And by addressing it, it's almost like also stepping into the fear, stepping into the pain. We've been conditioned to fear it and get away from it and not address it. But you almost make it sound like it's a game, like explore it, be excited about it, and have fun with it, because it really doesn't have to be as detrimental as people make it out to be, and live your life. So I love this. I want people to be able to know when your next seminar, do you have anything coming up where they can connect with you? And do you also offer one-on-one coaching for those who are interested?
Yeah. I don't know when this is going to be released. Do you know, have a release date?
Yeah, I usually do it about 2 weeks.
Okay. I'm going
If
to be
sooner, if you have a date, I can put it around that date so people can hear and attend. So you just let me know.
Yeah, well, I'm doing a big 5-day keto virtual event on October 2nd, which is just a few days away. So if it's a little challenging to get it out by then,
No, we can make it happen next week. Let's do it.
okay, yeah, that'll be cool. Yeah, so I'm doing a 5-day, what's called a Keto Kickstart Challenge. It's a 5-day virtual event, October 2nd through October 6th. It's free. We have people from all over the world attending. We're giving away over $20,000 in free prizes, and we're going live 2 hours every day, 5 days in a row. And we're just going to take a deep dive into keto, fasting, and different modalities. So it's ketocampchallenge.com to join for free. And then I'm going to be speaking in Utah, in your area, actually, October 20th and 21st in South Jordan, Utah. I don't know how far that is from you. Aren't you in Utah?
Yeah, I'm in Salt Lake City, so it's like 15 minutes. Unfortunately, I won't be in town when you're in town.
Oh,
Oh
yeah. I
my
think we had
gosh.
spoke about that, right? Yeah.
Right, but so tell us where people can find you here, there, because I've got, my big fan base in Utah. I'll send them your way.
Yeah, that'll be cool. It's called the Live It to Lead It conference, hosted by my mentor, Dr. Daniel Pompa. I'll be attending and speaking.
Yeah.
And that's, if you just Google Live It to Lead It, Dr. Pompa, it's October 20th and 21st in South Jordan, Utah. So I'll be there as well.
Amazing. So all of you guys that, my big following in Utah, you guys go check it out. We've also done a recording with Dr. Pompa, and he talks a lot about, cell detoxification, some of these things you talk about. And I've been to his clinics with someone close to me at the time who's gone through some transformational stuff. And so many key valuable nuggets. And really, if you're willing to open up your mind and expand beyond what you're told, how incredible of a healing experience you can have in your life. So, Ben,
Right.
Thank you so much for being on here today and sharing your experience and doing the hard work, doing the work to empower and hopefully give somebody else the courage to start doing their own work.
Thank you, Bonnie. No, it was a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to educate your community. I enjoyed meeting you in Florida a few weeks ago. I love the way that happened. So thank you so much for the opportunity. I had a blast with you today.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you like what you heard, please share it and help us keep the conversation going. We can't grow without you. So thank you in advance for your support of Power of Perseverance.